welcome to In the Channel from channelbuzz.ca, bringing news and information to the Canadian IT channel community for the last 16 years. I'm Robert Dutt, editor of channelbuzz.ca, and your host for the show. This week, I've been at ServiceNow's Knowledge 2026 conference in Las Vegas, where the company spent the week making the case for what it's calling agentic business. The argument that the AI pilot era is over and autonomous agents doing real enterprise work, governed by a platform layer, is the new reality. Yesterday, you heard ServiceNow's global channel chief on what it means for the partner model. This episode's a different question. What does it actually mean if you're a Canadian enterprise or a Canadian partner? My guest is Cristin Gooderham, Area Vice President for Canada Enterprise Sales at ServiceNow. She's leading the company's go-to-market motion in Canada at what is genuinely a pivotal moment. A week where the platform her team sells just repositioned itself as the governance layer for all enterprise AI, not just workflow automation. We talked about where Canadian organizations actually are on this journey, what makes this different from the US, and where she sees the near-term opportunity for her Canadian partners. Let's get right into it, my chat with Cristin Gooderham. Cristin, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for taking the time with me.
Well, and thanks for having me out to Knowledge to get a sense of what's going on here. When you look at where Canadian enterprises right now are on AI adoption, a big theme obviously this week is kind of moving from the idea of proof of concepts to proving actual value. Curious where you see the Canadian market in that regard. Where are we in kind of getting past pilots to actual deployments? Are we ahead, behind? Is it more complicated than that?
I wouldn't say we're behind. I would say we're kind of right on pace with what I've seen from my particularly US counterparts, where we have some organizations that are driving full force ahead. And then we do have some that are still stuck in that POC landscape where they're really still struggling to kind of define what they really want AI to be for them, which is probably the biggest thing. Where we've seen organizations really do a tremendous job is where they've come with a very strong point of view of what their business challenge was and trying to look at it from an AI point of view versus, I wonder what AI could solve for me.
So the more concrete the approach, the better, it sounds like, basically.
Absolutely. Tying everything to a business outcome that actually can, particularly if it can support revenue, is where we see organizations be able to find not just, the energy, but the funding to put towards that.
Bill McDermott's framing this morning was the AI blind spot that organizations running agents without governance visibility, which I guess has kind of been the state of play heretofore. Given what you know about Canadian enterprises, whether it's regulatory caution, public sector sensitivity, just Canadian conservatism in terms of not wanting to be the first out on that limb, do you think that message lands differently back home in Canada than it does in the US or in other markets?
I think for ServiceNow, it lands even stronger in the Canadian market because of that conservatism. So the reality is platforms like ServiceNow, what we're really bringing to the market is true visibility into your AI asset estate and being able to actually govern and audit what is going on with your AI agents. The reality is no one's going to win this AI race. It's not going to be one organization that is going to have all the AI agents. That's just not a realistic expectation. But having visibility into what all those agents are doing, particularly once they start talking to each other, I think Canadian organizations are going to be very interested to have a view of that estate before they make massive investments in AI. And we've already had those discussions with a lot of our clients that really want to understand, of course, we want to get AI. Of course, we want to find efficiency gains, but we need to do it in a way that we can govern it. And that's been a very key message. And it's great to hear Bill reiterating that here, because I think that's really what ServiceNow can bring to the table.
How live has that governance discussion been with clients to date?
I would say the discussion has been very live. The implementation and the action of it, we are working diligently on that piece. And where we've seen success is where we have certain clients in particular verticals that are far more mature with ServiceNow than others. For example, our banks in Canada have been invested in ServiceNow and really viewing us as a strategic platform since as early as 2010 in some cases. And they've made investments not just from an IT point of view, but they've expanded into the security and the risk areas of our platform those are the ones where we're having the most productive discussions and are really moving quickly beyond POVs and POCs into true value.
I get that. I'm curious to what degree you see regulatory environment as backfilling that as well. Just how often is it kind of being driven by either existing or coming regulation, especially in regulated industries?
As always, the laws are typically behind the technology. So I would say that what I've seen is that our own customers are taking a very forward-facing look at it because they know that regulation will be something to consider. So we've had tremendous discussions on AI processing data, data at rest, different discussions like that in terms of Canadian sovereignty of the data. That has been a really hot topic. There's no governance, like strong governments coming from the federal government to say, hey, all data must reside in Canada at all times. But the AI component has made it very interesting, and it's a discussion we're having constantly with our customers.
A stat that came up yesterday was that 90% of ServiceNow implementations globally are partner involved or partner delivered. What does that mix look like in Canada? What can you tell me about kind of the mix of the GSIs versus smaller partners? And are you seeing a new breed of more specialized AI-focused partners kind of emerging that are punching above their weight and getting your attention?
So the partner ecosystem in Canada is absolutely, as you described, a complete mix between everything from global GSIs down to extremely unique niche partners. Over the last few years, we did see a tremendous amount of our really strong partners actually get purchased by global GSIs. So I've been at ServiceNow for 6 years now. When I got here, we actually had a tremendous amount of point partners, ServiceNow specialized and very focused on a particular part of our platform. And that's something that kind of went away for a little bit because so many GSIs were excited at the opportunity to expand their ServiceNow practices. So we're seeing that resurgence of those smaller point solution partners. And they're coming back with that view of ServiceNow only and AI first, which has been really exciting to see.
I wonder if this becomes a cycle that repeats itself as those folks grow up and we see another wave of channel consolidation down the future.
Potentially that is absolutely one. But I will say that the opportunity for the partners in Canada to focus on ServiceNow is tremendous. And we're really excited to see some of these up and coming partners coming out. So we had 2 recently launched in Western Canada, both Ardent Labs and Skymark. And these are the ones that are taking kind of a ServiceNow only focus, which is a very different focus than the GSIs. The GSIs are fantastic, but they're going to really look holistically. And in some cases, a ServiceNow dedicated partner can really make an impact.
One trend that we're seeing across the channel is the multi-partner engagement becoming even more common. And you're nodding your head as I say that, so I'm just assuming you're going to agree with that. Curious what you're seeing in terms of that kind of situation where one of the big GSIs tags in those more specialist partners to help fill the bench, to meet customer needs, whatever it may be.
It is absolutely critical, and it is something that we at ServiceNow fully support, and we do it ourselves. We have our own expert services, and a lot of times we will even engage niche partners to fill in particular gaps. So one of the areas that I see our partner ecosystem doing that a tremendous amount is in the security and risk space, because some of these partners are phenomenal on the overall platform, but security and risk is a different skill set. It's even a different vocabulary. So I love seeing partners being able to collaborate because it's usually the best option for the customer. And honestly, it's the best outcome for everybody because the partners are successful, the customer is successful, and therefore ServiceNow is successful.
And better solution overall.
Absolutely.
I realize this is not how one builds out a business model, but I'm just curious, as you said, there's that rising generation of ServiceNow focused partners. If you were to point out, this is the opportunity to go for. These are the green fields. What would you say are the biggest kind of opportunities for that kind of partner to focus themselves at that's underserviced, underrealized, however you want to frame it, in the Canadian market today?
So I've touched on it a little bit already, security and risk. And now if you've seen with our acquisitions of both Armis and Veza, that is an area that we are going to continue to invest in. So that's absolutely one I would say that if ServiceNow partners are looking to expand their skill set, that is where we need additional help. It is one, when we started having the AI control tower discussion late last year, it was at every executive briefing we did, the thing that made every CIO sit up and start paying attention. So that narrative, that messaging is really resonating. So anything in that space is really where we're going to need to see continued partner enablement and adoption, and hopefully new partners coming in to pick it up. Beyond that, also, as we continue to make moves into the CRM space, those are also going to be areas where we need additional partners. We have phenomenal partners out of the US that have come up and will do work here. But as an opportunity for, more Canadian jobs, that's definitely an area I would point for Canadian partners.
The AI Factory and NVIDIA partnership that came up, how do you see that in a Canadian lens, first of all?
I mean, I think the key piece here is that, NVIDIA and ServiceNow together have a great story. We know most of our customers are investing in NVIDIA. A number of the telcos, we've already had discussions with them. So it's really just an opportunity for us to continue to expand our AI footprint and help have really positive kind of three-way, relationships, I would say. Because as NVIDIA becomes more and more critical in every market, it's fantastic to see that they see the value in ServiceNow, and our customers are seeing the same thing.
Data sovereignty, big issue, obviously, and in the Canadian market, it sounded like it's not a regulatory concern so much from your comments earlier, but how do you see it playing? How do you see it trending? What are customers asking you about, talking to you about when it comes to that area?
Data sovereignty is a hot topic in every customer engagement we have. So obviously in the public sector space, it is one that has a tremendous amount of concern. We've seen a real shift from the federal government in terms of their position on sovereignty. The federal government hasn't come out and defined, very strongly what data sovereignty looks like. But it's absolutely something that we're very focused on. We announced earlier last year a large investment in Canada to build out our own isolated full stack to host all of our public sector clients to ensure that we have Canadians on Canadian soil managing the data. But it does stop somewhat short of sovereignty. If you think about true data sovereignty, that any SaaS solution, right? The benefit of SaaS is the fact that we can push upgrades down to our customers at any given time. As soon as you look to true data sovereignty, that's the piece that kind of closes off. It doesn't mean that it's a negative. It's just something that clients need to make decisions on. Yeah.
With Control Tower coming online and the way that Bill was kind of repositioning the company almost a bit around that governance layer and being that control, that orchestrator almost of the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
How does that change the partner role, do you think?
I don't think it changes the partner role tremendously. I mean, we have always been, if you listen to the keynote this morning, right, Bill said, we were the platform of platforms. We're still advocating that message. Our message has just refined itself to really focus again on securing and governing the AI estate, as opposed to perhaps a more open approach. If I could say it that way. I don't think it changes the partner lens or ecosystem in terms of their involvement. It's still going to be critical for partners to help us get our customers to success. But I do think it's just kind of that retraining and that focus into those areas where understanding the security and governance piece is going to be so critical moving forward.
The security piece is so big in the channel writ large. I'm curious if you see that as another kind of entree or entry point for new partners to come into the family and start adding some of the stuff that you guys are doing to what they're doing with other vendors and their own managed services, et cetera.
Absolutely. I think that we are going to see different. So, if you think about GSIs that obviously can look at everything, where I think there's a really interesting opportunity is for more of those security focused partners that perhaps haven't really focused on ServiceNow before, but they're focused on multiple different point solutions, to actually start looking at ServiceNow as another kit, another tool to put in their bag. The reality is that, as I said, we are having expanded security conversations all the time. And I think it's very clear through our acquisitions, as I already mentioned, that that's going to be a continued focus. So I think that the security partners out there, say like an Arctic that were already engaged with I believe they were already engaged with Armis. This could be a really interesting kind of push for them to take on more of ServiceNow.
The good part is that there's no shortage of security tools out there to take on. The challenge as a partner is that there's no shortage of security tools to take on.
Yeah.
I'm curious, It may be too early in the conversation to really get into this, but I'm curious if you're finding you're getting that mind share, you're getting in front of those security focused partners, or is that if that's a future state conversation, is there sort of a strategy there to identify the right partners, get attention, and get on their maps?
So where I would say those conversations are already happening, I wouldn't say we're having them with those kind of specific security partners, but a number of the GSIs have very strong security and risk partners, or security and risk practices. That is where the conversation is really trending towards. So we've had a lot of reach out from our Canadian partners at organizations, say like KPMG, where they run a security and risk practice, very excited about these acquisitions and wanting to discuss how this is going to fold into their practice. So I definitely think there's opportunity at every level of partner.
We talked a little bit about governance, and I noticed that Bell Canada is tomorrow presenting on the subject of their governance guardrails implementation with you guys. What can you tell me about the relationship there and what they've done and where you see them? I'm curious if we're starting to see a cluster of organizations moving towards that space. Is Bell still sort of an early mover, a bellwether kind of partner in that area? What does that look like?
Well, so Bell, when we talk about Bell, we kind of have to talk about two different angles of Bell, right? So we have Bell as a customer, so Bell Business, who are a phenomenal customer that we've engaged in a very long-term relationship with, and they've made a huge investment to really innovate on the ServiceNow platform. And then underneath Bell, we also have their partner, Ateco, which is a fully backed Bell organization that is a services partner in the Canadian ecosystem. So there's Bell as the customer, and then there's also Bell as the partner. And they are both, we have phenomenal relationships with both, and excited to get Ateco, who's doing already tremendous things in the ecosystem. I know they're looking to expand not only throughout Canada, but even into the US to bring some of the learnings that they've found working with Bell Canada to other telcos.
When you're talking to Canadian solution providers who maybe seen the announcements today and trying to figure out where they fit into the whole agentic business piece, we talked about kind of opportunities to go after as a new partner, but specific to the agentic business piece. What's your advice on where partners should focus, where to build practice, where kind of the opportunity is richest and most accessible at this moment in time in the Canadian market?
So I'll go back to what I said at the very, very beginning of this, is that it's focusing on business outcomes. So nobody is interested in a discussion on agentic AI to modernize your CMDB, which again, sounds exciting to me, but that doesn't really trend everywhere else. It's truly about finding problems in the organization where it can lead to either revenue generation or true cost savings. And I think that where partners will be successful is if they can quickly identify whether it's verticalized, perhaps opportunities, across, oil and gas or say telco or retail that they can bring to customers where they've had success before. I don't know that there's a single point of entry. That's, I think, the challenge with AI is that it can do so many things. But Canadians like to start small. They like to be able to prove something out quickly, and then they like to move fast. So that's where I would always caution partners is look for opportunities to do just that. Start small, move quickly, and then progress to the next step.
That's great advice. I appreciate your taking the time, especially given how busy things are, but you really helped put a Canadian lens on some of what we've heard. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
There you have it. Cristin Gooderham, Area Vice President for Canada Enterprise Sales from ServiceNow at Knowledge 2026 in Las Vegas. I'd like to thank Cristin for her time during what was clearly a very busy week for the ServiceNow team. Thank you for listening. Here's a few things I'm taking from this one. First, the Canadian conservatism point. Cristin made the case that the traits that have historically made Canadian enterprise slower adopters, caution around governance, preferences for proven approaches, regulatory sensitivity, are actually an advantage at this specific moment. The agentic AI conversation leads with governance. That's a message that lands here before it lands anywhere else, and that's an opening for partners. Second, the partner ecosystem observation. What she described as a market that went through a consolidation phase where boutique ServiceNow specialists got absorbed into larger integrators and is now seeing a new generation of AI-first specialists starting to emerge to fill that gap again. If you're a mid-sized Canadian solution provider trying to figure out where you fit, that's encouraging news. And third, security as the door. The Armis and Visa acquisitions she referenced aren't just product additions. They're a signal that ServiceNow is actively trying to pull in a new category of security domain partners who haven't historically been in the ServiceNow ecosystem. If your practice is in that space, it's worth attention. More from Knowledge 2026 on Monday, when I'll have my conversation with Stephen Kiss, partner and national ServiceNow practice leader at EY Canada. A conversation about what the boutique to Big Four journey actually teaches you about where the channel's headed next. If you're finding the podcast useful, we'd love for you to listen or subscribe wherever you're listening. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, most of the major directories. Ratings and reviews are always appreciated. Until next time, I'm Robert Dutt for channelbuzz.ca, and I'll see you in the channel.